Welcome back to Careers and Coffee Talk. I'm your host, Laura. Do you ever hear people say, somebody should really do something about that? Well, good news. Today's guest is somebody who can show us exactly how we can do something about that. Nicole Tisdale spent over a decade on the inside of government, from advising senior members of Congress to serving on the White House National Security Council, where she helped shape national security and intelligence policy, including cybersecurity and emerging technology initiatives. But what makes her story so powerful isn't just what she did inside those halls of power, it's what she's doing now to make them more accessible to everyone else. As the founder of Advocacy Blueprints and author of Right to Petition, a practical guide to creating change in government, Nicole helps citizens, advocates, and organizations learn how to make their voices heard effectively and ethically. She's proof that the skills to create change aren't reserved for insiders and that with the right tools, anyone can make a difference. From the West Wing to the classroom to community advocacy, Nicole has dedicated her career to demystifying how Washington really works and how issues like cybersecurity, privacy, and technology policy touch every part of our daily lives. So grab your coffee and maybe a notebook because this conversation is all about turning frustration into action and learning how to navigate the systems that help shape our everyday lives. Let's get into it. Nicole, so happy to have you here. Welcome to Careers and Coffee Talk.
Of course. Thank you for having me, Laura. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. I'm so ready to jump into everything. First, I always have to start with, do you have your coffee or another beverage of choice?
I don't have coffee, but I
Okay.
do have it's always a protein shake, like
Okay.
a protein hot chocolate or a protein drink. I actually don't drink coffee, which is
Okay.
like, it's tough. And people are like, it's okay, you probably drink tea. And I'm like, I don't actually drink that
Also
either.
not that.
And so my mug is also always big. So like hand wise, people are very concerned when they think I'm drinking coffee because they're like, that's a lot of caffeine. And I'm like, no, I'm meeting my protein goals.
Not to fear. Yeah, exactly. As women, we really have to take care of meeting our protein goals. That's very important.
I tell someone I end up feeling like I'm about to join like a weightlifting team. I'm like, I got to get my grams. I got to hit my grams.
Exactly. Maybe that's next. Who knows?
You never know.
I love it. So I always like to start at the very beginning of your story. When you look back to like little baby Nicole, what did you want to be when you grew up as a child?
So, and I was thinking about this the other day because my mom always brings this up. So she used to keep the little book with your report cards, and they ask
Yes.
you questions. Now it's a photo that
Hmm.
parents have all that stuff. And so I wanted to be a news reporter and a journalist for a long time. Mostly I just wanted to be Oprah. So like in parentheses, everything is like news reporter, journalist, Oprah.
Right.
And eventually I realized that I wanted to be a lawyer. I
Mhm.
spent a lot of time with my grandparents watching Perry Mason and Matlock,
Yes.
and all the things. And I just thought it was so cool to like be able to go into rooms and advocate for people.
Yes.
And so literally until I found out that political science was a major and working in public policy was a career, I wanted to be a journalist or a lawyer.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that it kind of stayed with you and it has been like a through line of your career now, which I'm excited to talk about. Let's get into it. So I know you've spent time, I think we met years and years ago while you were on the Hill. How was it that you ended up there? What was your path like?
Yeah, so I have like kind of a non-traditional path that actually once I got to DC realized was pretty traditional. So I
Sure.
didn't grow up in a political family, but I had an opportunity to attend what we call Girls State and Boys State. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but to any listeners that have high school age kids, you should be trying to find out about Girls State and Boys State. It's through the American Legion, and you, for a week, you go and you conduct yourself as if you're the 51st state in the Union. And you're a new state, so you have to come up with your cities, you got to come up with your counties, and you literally elect people to these positions.
I love
And
it.
so I got there on day one, and I was like, I'll be mayor of the town. Like, I can figure this out. And so after I came back, I was just so excited. I was talking to my guidance counselor, and I told her, and she always like tells the story. I'm like, I think that trip changed my life, and she's like, well, tell me what you enjoyed about it. And so when we were done, she told me, she was like, you can major in political science. Like when you
Mm,
go to college, you can major in political science and you can have a career where you may not be the mayor, but you can work with the mayor, or you may not be the governor, but you can work for the governor.
right.
And I kid you not, Laura, since Miss Williams told me that, I was like full focus, like that's what I'm gonna do. And
I
so
love that.
I'm first generation college student, and so I hadn't picked out my major because I didn't even know you were supposed to pick out a major before you get to college. And so once I got to orientation, I just was like very clear, I'm gonna major in political science. This is the path that I want to do. And through the connections, I went to the University of Mississippi
Hmm.
for undergrad and law school, and they're very active in public policy. Their alums are senators, are members of Congress.
Yeah.
And so I was able to use that network to get my first internship in DC, which led to the second internship. And so I'm the queen of internships. I had 8 total,
Oh, wow.
which is so aggressive. And I tell students all the time, I'm like, you do not need 8 internships. But I also went to law school. So it was like my undergrad internships and it was my law
Sure.
school internships. But for someone like me, what I was hearing a lot too is like you need to be connected to get into public
Hmm.
policy. You need to be connected to get into politics. And because I didn't have those family ties, I just took every opportunity I could to do an
Hmm.
internship to show people I can learn things, I can do things, I can be of value to the team. And it worked out really well because when I graduated, everyone I'd interned with offered me a job. And
Amazing.
like they always did the thing of like, Nicole, when you finish school, we would love to have you back. And they all really did like offer me jobs, which was really good.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. Also, shout out to Ms. Williams for pushing you in that direction, letting you know that that was even an option, because who knows where you would
Yeah.
have ended up otherwise. What was it that did it for you about public service?
I love helping people.
Yeah.
And I am one of those people. I think it's important for people to know like what motivates you. And
Hmm.
I love when people have a sense of gratitude
Hmm.
because you've helped them with something. And so the way I grew up, we used a lot of public assistance programs. And
Hmm.
so I probably had more interactions with bureaucracy than like the average person did,
Right.
just because it was like it's a process every year to for my parents or my mom to actually file the paperwork to
Hmm.
show what her income was so that we could get free lunch. And so like
Yeah.
I just there was a lot of bureaucracy that I knew about. And I say bureaucracy in terms of like not in a negative way, just like this is how this works. And like
Yeah.
if you are going to um get this scholarship program for summer camp, then there is like an application that you all are going to have to fill out, and then someone from the county is going to have to like confirm it. And so I always had an appreciation, I think, for public servants because they were also helping me. Like they were, like I knew who the head administrator was at our school that like approved our free lunch program. Um,
Right.
that was Miss Katie. Um, and so like it was to me as I like met public servants, they were always helping me. And I thought that was
Hmm.
just such a cool idea to like
Yeah.
you can have a job where your actual job, the thing that you get paid to do is to help people.
Yes.
Um, and so it's something that like at a very young age, and also I get a lot of gratitude from it. And
Hmm.
so, being a public servant, you don't always get the instant gratitude. But I tell people, when I used to answer the phone, people tell you call your member of Congress. I was the
Hmm.
person that would answer the phone
Right.
when I was an intern. And the average person doesn't ever call their member of Congress. So when someone is calling their member of Congress, they're having the worst day of their life.
Hmm.
They're having the worst week of their life. They're having the worst month. They've been the victim of a natural disaster.
Hmm.
They've been a victim of a cyber scam or a cyber fraud, or they just can't, they moved and they can't get their social security check. And so usually by the time someone is calling a member of Congress, they've tried multiple things. And so
Right.
to be able to be in a place of like, you've gotten to the right person and I'm going to help you was something I get chills even when I say it
Oh,
now.
yeah.
It's like just so rewarding. And it's not that you can't get that from other places, but that is the mission of public service. So it was
Yeah.
always good.
No, that's such an amazing answer. I love that. So you had 100 internships. 100 job offers. Which was the one that you ended up with?
The one I ended up with is on the House Homeland Security Committee, and it was my last internship. It was the spring semester before I graduated law school. And so the House Homeland Security Committee at the time, the majority staff, which is the Democratic staff,
Hmm.
and it was Chairman Benny Thompson, who's from Mississippi, not the part of Mississippi that I'm from. But you grow up in Mississippi, especially if you're learning about politics, you're doing all these internships. He's just a known factor.
Hmm.
He served for a long time, but also some of these public assistance programs that I was a part of and like a beneficiary of, he supported them. So you
Yeah.
know his name. But it was also the hardest internship to get. I tried to get that internship starting back probably 5 or 6 years before it actually landed. And one day I was interning for Senator Thad Cochran from
Hmm.
Mississippi, and I saw Congressman Thompson going to go vote. And he was on the train in the Capitol taking him to
Yes.
go vote. And he tells a story different than I tell the story. I say I was very impassioned, and so I did chase him down to an elevator. The story breaks between us there because he says I yelled at him. I think I know I was out of breath and I think I was just excited. But he always said I just yelled at him, I've been trying to get an internship with you for years. Nobody in your office will call me back. I'm not from your district, but I know your district, da da da. And he panicked like a little and then calmed me down. He took me on the floor. I got to watch him vote. And then he just did like an
Oh,
interview, like on the spot. And he was like, okay, well, the next time you have an opportunity to do an internship, like tell them you saw me and I approved it and we'll get you an internship. And so the spring of 2009, I was in DC and he remembered me. Like the staff was like, "Did you really yell at him?" So it was really good. But that was my introduction to national security as well. Up until that point, I had been doing a lot of most of my internships centered around rural local
hmm.
policy and then also agricultural policy. And so it was really that internship changed my life because
Yeah.
I got to see up close, like all the things that national security and the Department of Homeland Security touch. When I talk about those people
Yeah.
calling their member of Congress, for the most part, a lot of the times when people are calling their member of Congress, it's something that the Department of Homeland Security touches.
Yeah.
And so it was like immediately kind of fell in love with it.
Yeah.
I had been doing Hurricane Katrina constituent work in Mississippi, and to be able to go to the committee and they were doing the policies and the laws on natural disasters and recovery was like a dream come true. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they would call you, and at that time, that's when you would call me because that's where I
yes,
was.
that's how we met. Yeah, I tell people that was because you're the thing when you start your career, and I don't think people talk about it enough. And one of the things that I've always tried to do when I don't know something, I ask.
Hmm.
And I tell people it's so interesting that I would like later end up at the National Security Council and working in
Hmm.
legislative affairs because when I showed up to the Hill, I was 26,
Hmm.
never had a full-time job, and not only were the department's legislative affairs offices being responsive to me because I was congressional staffer, they were also teaching me how their departments and their agencies worked, how their relationships with the committee worked. And I always had such a deep respect for people
Hmm.
who work in legislative affairs because I don't think people fully understand that those people like you, later on, people like me, you're really in charge of the relationship that your entire department has with
Yeah.
a member, with a committee. And the people who've worked in legislative affairs have always taken that so seriously, and they've
Hmm.
been such good caretakers and stewards of those relationships. And I really like everyone. It's also their benefit too, because like I showed up and I was like, I want to learn about this department. If I'm going to be doing oversight, I want to know the good. I want to know the bad.
Yes.
I want people to talk to me. And so I got to travel all over the world, but also all over the United States, which was really important for me because of
Hmm.
just the way my background and our financial positioning. I'd never been west of the Mississippi River,
Yeah. Yeah.
never been north of Washington, D.C. And so you get to this committee, and my first portfolio was maritime security. And it's like, well, I haven't actually been to a port. And I remember like saying that to our staff director at the time, and
Yeah.
he was like, we will teach you all of this. We will also get you connected with people at DHS. who can help you to learn this. But yeah, you should not be working on maritime security and you haven't been to a port.
Yeah.
And so it was an amazing opportunity because as I was getting to like travel the world and see things outside of what I knew growing up, I also was learning about policy and
Hmm.
governance, not just from public officials and public servants in the United States, but in Singapore and in Malaysia, and like you get this appreciation for how no matter what country we're in, I tell people no matter what your party affiliation, like we are all public servants, and
Hmm.
even when there's a language barrier, there's never a mission difference, no
Yeah.
matter where you are.
Yeah, it's got to be really eye-opening to have those experiences too. And I think to your point about, learning from like the executive branch side, right? Like it's mutually beneficial because at the same time, we're learning from you and from your counterparts too. Like what issues are important to people? What issues are people coming to their member of Congress about? And so that was really important as well.
Yeah.
Um, I want to talk about, you talk about some of the traveling and some of the experiences that you had. Was there a moment that maybe has stuck with you that you're like, I can't believe I'm here right now. Like, I can't believe I'm doing this.
I would have to say the first time that I left the country, this is going to sound like so boastful. This I am aware this is nobody's first country is this country, but it was mine. So the first country I ever visited was Singapore.
Okay.
And I remember I didn't even know how to turn the lights on in the room. I never used the key card to like turn everything on and like almost caused an international incident because I went a whole day. I knew the problem was me, but I didn't know how to fix it. So we got there at night and I didn't have electricity in my room and I literally got ready for my meetings the next
In
day
the
through like
dark.
the sunlight in the dark, through the sunlight of the window. And it wasn't until we completed the meetings that day, and I was like, I don't want to cause any issues, but I don't have electricity in my room, which to everybody, especially our Singaporean lead, they were like, that's actually impossible. Um, but it was just, I read about Singapore, and
Hmm.
it's something about the way we were received, how people wanted to share information with us. Again, we were there because Singapore had one of the largest ports, and
Hmm.
it's an amazing partner to the United States on many different issues. And so it was so interesting because I was worried about what they would. I was so young. I was 26. And I knew through our meetings and things that we were doing in the United States that I was walking into a lot of rooms and I
Hmm.
was not only the newest person, but I was also the youngest person. Because
Hmm.
just the path on the hill, most people don't start on a committee. You
Yeah.
usually start in a personal office working on policy and stuff. And so, even the people in Singapore who knew I was new felt they were so endearing to me of like, and you may not know this, but we want to make sure that you understand this. And also here's some of the history of some of the concerns that we have had, but also
Hmm.
we were able to work with you all on this legislation. And so to me, I thought that was very foundational in terms of like, okay, we 12-hour time difference, all the things in the world. Um, it's just people are just people everywhere.
Yeah.
And people are working on the same thing and they want people to feel safe, they want people to feel secure, and they want democracy to work for people.
Yeah.
And so that is my like country trip. But I do this thing whenever I'm in a new city, whenever I'm in a new country. I just think about where this place exists in Mississippi, and it's so interesting when you're like, what is the most impactful? I think I what I love about when I travel is like being in Normandy, France, and being like, this reminds me so much of Tupelo, Mississippi, because the coffee shops look very similar or something like that. And so I do that all the time. I try to find one place, one store, one restaurant in a place that I visit and try to like tie it back to some place
Yeah.
in
Make
Mississippi.
it like more familiar.
Yes, yeah.
I love that. Also being in a coffee shop in Normandy sounds amazing right now.
It is. I mean, the people of Normandy love Americans, like still, and I just remember being there and like that's a good example of like partnership and
Hmm.
allyship, and those are communities that were like the older people in that community. They remember when Americans showed up to help them,
Hmm.
and even the people who were my age, like that, there's a learning there, and there's still an appreciation that they have, and I think that's why I think is one of the reasons it's really important for people to travel if you
Yeah.
can, because from the outside looking in, I remember feeling like, like you're American, you know what people think about Americans. And so you're always a little bit hesitant when you travel because you don't know how you're going to be received. And I was in Paris before, and the Parisians don't always love us quite as much as everybody else. And so I remember getting to Normandy and I was just completely caught off guard by like the kindness, but also just
Yeah.
the excitement that we were there.
Yeah, that's amazing. What an incredible experience.
Yeah.
Speaking of perception versus reality, a lot of people just see the White House and the West Wing, on TV shows, right? What are some of the most surprising lessons that you took away from the White House about and the Hill about how power and influence actually work in DC?
Yeah, I would say there are more opportunities on the Hill to engage and influence power than I think it is in the executive branch, especially at the National Security Council.
Hmm.
I keep bringing up this like you can call your member of Congress, but there really aren't a lot of barriers between you getting a message to your member of Congress or at
Hmm.
least someone that can act on behalf of your member of Congress. It is literally you can send them a Facebook message, you can pick up the phone, you can call them. And you also, in the state of Mississippi, we have one of the smaller representations, but I have six members of Congress in Mississippi. I have two
Hmm.
senators. I have four members in the House. That's six different opportunities that if I wanted to engage on something that is happening in Mississippi, that's six different people plus their staffs that I have an
Yeah.
opportunity to engage. And it's so funny because like when I left the Hill, I wrote the book Right to Petition, and it's a book about how to advocate and how to influence. And so it was so interesting to go to the White House, the National Security Council, where not only do you not have a named known representative that you can talk to influence policy,
Hmm.
you can't even come and physically meet with us unless you have a security clearance. Like we don't even have unclassified space for the
Right.
general public to come and engage with us. There is no phone line for you to like pick up the phone and say, I want to talk to Nicole Tisdale about cyber policy.
Hmm.
And I think that's a feature, not a bug. I think
Yeah.
I'm a little biased, but I think the founders were very intentional about Congress being the first branch and being Article 1 of the Constitution. That is the branch that is the closest to people. And it's a different level of influence at the White House though, because there aren't so many avenues to engage. I felt like I had more power to influence strategy and like what happens next at the White House than I did in Congress. Congress, by the way it's set up, is very collaborative. So
Hmm.
once I want to do something and I think it's a good idea, that's one person that has been convinced. Even if you get me on board, I still have to convince at least 50 other staffers. And then we got to convince more than 200 members in the House, and I need to convince 50 to 60 members in the Senate. You just still have a long way to go once you
Yeah.
have convinced one person. That path is so much shorter at the White House because you are empowered to. I always tell people there's no one to check your work. So,
Right.
like, when you decide, like, okay, the way that I'm going to execute this strategy is I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. There is no one else to clear it to say, well, I don't think we should do X, Y, and Z. It's you, by the time you get to a role like that, you are empowered
Hmm.
based off your experience, your reputation, and your expertise to just go do the thing.
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily that one has more power or influence than the other, but it just looks dramatically different between those two.
Sure. Yeah. And then you spent years, right, between the Hill and the White House. And then you decided to make the leap from doing the work to teaching others how to work with the government, right? And not against it. For you, what was it that sparked that shift?
It was seeing a mix on the Hill. When you're on the Hill, you see some of the, I tell people this is like the Super Bowl of advocacy when you work on Capitol Hill. You
Yeah.
get to see people who are so good at their craft, at their
Yeah.
profession. They know how to get things done. And I know like people have a negative connotation about lobbyists and people who work at trade associations or who are in government affairs,
Hmm.
but those people to me, and this is coming from a barred attorney, I see them the same way as the other attorneys who are barred, who are
Mhm.
advocates in front of the courtroom because they have the expertise, they have the education, they have the experience, and they know how to advocate in front of a judge.
Yeah.
The same thing on the Hill. There is a level of expertise and experience that is required to actually know how these things work and how to effectively influence policy. And what I also saw is like people have really good missions
Hmm.
and members want to be helpful to them, but because they don't always have access to those Super Bowl level advocates, sometimes even if you want to be helpful, it's really, really hard because they don't always know even to how to ask you for what you
Right.
need. And so I used to tell people I would have meetings sometimes where and I had a really good working relationship with my Republican counterparts, but I would have meetings sometimes and I would like this never happened with agency officials because they have Super Bowl level experts helping them in legislative affairs. But with some of the like community groups or small businesses that would come in, I do the what I call I'm going to close the door now because I want to talk to you about how you're advocating. And it wasn't a place to be mean or harmful to people, but it's just to say, look, you are talking to me about an appropriation, and I
Hmm.
am on an authorizing committee.
Hmm.
And like you come up with an analogy and you walk them through. And for the most part, most people, they just knew they needed to meet with a member of Congress. And like,
Hmm.
even if they figured out that they need to get to a committee, they don't realize what they're asking you to do. Because I joke with people, Schoolhouse Rock did a really good job about how the bill comes to law. And so
Exactly.
many people would come in and they're like, we need this law, we need this. And so I would always like pull it back. I'm like, why don't you tell me what your problem is and
Hmm.
let me see if there's another way around this. And for the most part, most people don't need a public law. That's just the only thing that they know to ask a member of Congress to do.
Right.
And so even part of writing the book, half of the book is how to set up an advocacy campaign. But the back part of the book is here are 50 things you can ask a member of Congress to do for you based off of what you need.
Hmm.
And it was going to be 49 because I didn't want to include asking for a public law, but I did put it as like the last thing in hopes that like at least people will have an opportunity to read some of those other things before they get there. Because being really clear with people of like advocacy is not always the law. Like
Hmm.
in public policy, it's not always getting a regulation or getting a law on the books. Sometimes it is the process that is broken, and you can
Hmm.
fix the process a lot faster than issuing a new regulation or getting a new law on the books. But I think for the most part, we just don't teach people how to advocate in the United States. And so I wanted to do my part and kind of like a gift to people to say, I may not be able to like show up to your town or show up to your school, but for $15, I will give you all the knowledge that I have gained over this 10-year experience so that you can do it. And I was really happy with that book because what I learned, especially when I got to the White House, is some of my friends in legislative affairs, they were training new staffers and early career staffers of
Hmm.
like, and it was just all of these people who were reading this book that I didn't even necessarily intend for that to be
Right.
the original audience, but it has made me feel so good over the years because those I tell people if you're advocating on the Hill, it doesn't matter what your title is, it doesn't matter what your job is. You should know what tools you have at your disposal to
Hmm.
influence policy, to influence laws. Same thing in the executive branch. You all should know, like people in the executive branch should know what tools they have to
Yeah.
influence Congress. Congress is responsible for the authorities to carry out your mission and the money to get it done. And so it is important to not just have a good relationship, but to make sure that you're advocating for the right things too.
Yeah. No, I love the book. First of all, it's written, it's so straightforward and easy to understand for anybody, not just, I obviously I came from a perspective of having that executive branch, agency experience and working very closely with you all on the Hill, but the way that you lay it all out, it's a great balance of like it's practical to use as a guide, but it's also inspiring to help people actually want to get involved and then know how to do that. So I think it's fantastic and definitely going to add that to the book club for folks who are interested in checking it out. I also want to talk about your work with Advocacy Blueprints. This is your baby. Tell us about the mission. Who do you serve? And how do you translate your government experience into training and tools?
Yeah, so this is my baby. This is my I feel like a lot of us have like ideas and like you get running starts on things and then
Mhm.
you do other things. And so I always tell people this is like my sixth business.
Okay.
Yeah, and some of them are like crazy. Like I have a patent for a Christmas tree. Turns out I don't need to be in the Christmas tree business. And it's like I all throughout college I was a professional babysitter. I literally remember reading the Babysitters Club.
Oh,
And I was
yeah.
like, I can set up a business model like
Oh,
this. Like, this is
yeah.
great. To all parents listening, your kids should absolutely, boy, girl, everyone should read the Babysitters
Oh,
Club
they were the best.
series. That is like the best business books for
Yes.
kids because it's everything. It's marketing. It's how do you franchise? I'm like, this woman franchised a babysitting model. Tangent on the Babysitters Club
I
book.
love it.
But advocacy blueprints came from the idea and the place, and you know this coming from legislative affairs. For most of us, our like next step is to like go work at a lobbying firm or go to a trade association and like
Hmm.
basically continue to be a professional advocate who has experience and expertise advocating in front of the executive branch and the legislative branch and global institutions as well. But for me, I knew I wasn't going to be able to serve all of the communities that I served in that role. So
Yeah.
even the best lobbying firms, if they have a pro bono practice, they don't get to spend a lot of time. They may have a pro bono client, but they
Hmm.
don't get to spend a lot of time doing pro bono work. And
Sure.
so this was a crazy idea, but I did pitch it to like multiple lobbying firms. And people were just like, you cannot set up a 50-50 business, Nicole. You're not going to make enough money to like sustain yourself. And like
Uh-huh.
pro bono clients are going to take up so much of your time.
Hmm.
And I was like, I think I can do this. And so it really just started as like, some people start businesses and do ideas like from this place of Zen, like the world needs it. I just started from a place of like, I'll show people.
Right.
Like very honest, just being
Just
like,
like BGT chasing them down in the elevator,
yeah,
like
I'm just like, I know this is gonna work.
I'm gonna make it happen.
And so the way I explain it to people is I'm a consultant to most people's government affairs and their policy teams.
Okay.
So you imagine a corporation has a government affairs team,
Hmm.
or even a philanthropy has a government affairs team. They will hire a lobbying firm to help them get the meetings and to help them make the ask. But I'm actually their internal consultant. So
Okay.
making sure that the government affairs strategy matches whatever the new redesign internal strategy is for a strategic policy initiative, or in some cases, a product release.
Hmm.
And so I come in before there's ever a meeting on the Hill. So
Okay.
to make sure internally we have whatever the strategy is from the top, the government affairs strategy matches that. Once it is time to go to the Hill, I do the weedy, wonky stuff that we used to do in legislative affairs.
Yeah.
I can mark up, no one can mark up a piece of legislation like me. I can move some commas around. I know where the semicolon goes. I know when we need an exhaustive list. I know when we don't need an exhaustive list.
Hmm.
And there's also a lot of institutional knowledge. So I
Hmm.
know that this amendment that they're trying to propose is already a regulation because that was already included in a law 2 or 3 years ago, or I can go and I find it. And
Hmm.
so on the for-profit side of the house, that is the model of I am the consultant to the government affairs and the legislative affairs teams.
Yeah.
Because we know this too. We were so busy in those roles. And I tell people the folks that are in government affairs, whether you're in government or outside of government, they're so busy and they have so many things going on.
Hmm.
It's not a small feat to be able to mark up a piece of, like, to sit down,
Oh,
go through a
yeah.
piece of legislation, and then actually mark it up, do the passbacks. And so for my clients, I don't actually go to the meeting, but I help them get ready for the meeting. And it's like, also, sometimes they agree with me, sometimes they don't agree with me. I'm that thought partner to be like, okay, is this going to really do what you want it to do? And so
Hmm.
I tell people we basically put all the ingredients for the cake together. And when it is time for you to like actually go and lobby and advocate on the Hill, that's where your lobbying firm comes in place. And it's actually really good. Like a lot of my referrals come from other lobbying firms where they've worked with me and they're like, oh, we don't do that, but Nicole can like help you
Yeah,
all
yeah, yeah.
write up that bill. She can help you write the white paper. The like things that we do in legislative affairs, it's like I don't have to be the person that drafts the initial witness testimony, but you want me
Hmm.
doing your testimony.
Right.
Which we used to do this in legislative affairs when we
Yeah.
were in the executive branch. You need those people that are you are going in and out, but I am watching this committee every day. I know
Yeah.
everything that they're going on. I know what they're saying. I know what bills they've introduced. You want me looking at your legislation to make sure it is reflected before you go and you deliver it. So it's kind of a made up job, but only because I don't know why I'm like always like I don't know why people didn't do this before because my clients are all like very happy and they're like, we need you, we need you. But the other side of the house, I just show up to people who have no budget, or they have small budgets, but they are doing the right thing and they are
Hmm.
trying to do the right thing. And so those are rural trade associations who may have some money, but they don't have the like, oh, we can go out and hire $1 million lobbying firm
Right.
because our trade association is made up of rural water operators who are serving communities of less than 5,000 people. They're not gonna have a top 10 lobbying firm. And if
Yeah.
they do, they may not be able to focus on cybersecurity because they have all
Hmm.
of these other issues that they need to advocate in front of their membership. And I will say the pro bono clients are always the most suspicious of me because they're just like, so wait a minute. Like you're not charging. I'm like, it's gonna be fine. Because also what I've learned is like sometimes I want them to spend their advocacy budgets in other places. And
Hmm.
I actually tell my for-profit clients, I'm like, oh, I work with nonprofit, like you are supplementing and subsidizing the rates for the people who cannot. And because
Yeah.
I spend so much time publicly and internally talking about vulnerable communities and advocating for vulnerable communities, the for-profit clients are never shocked. They're never like
Yeah.
upset. They don't like try to negotiate their rate. They're like proud of it.
Yeah.
And like sometimes there's a place of partnership because
Yeah.
most of the clients are in national security and cyber. And so you can also connect them with each other.
Hmm.
And so it like serves both purposes because sometimes the corporate clients and the for-profit clients who can pay, they don't have access and they don't have inroads into some of the communities that they are trying to help. And so sometimes Advocacy Blueprints gets to be like that place of connection. But it's one of those things like if you're for profit and you're working for us to get more eyes and more people into cybersecurity, and you're
Hmm.
a nonprofit who is just, doing the best you can with what you have, those people should be working together and they
Yeah.
should be advocating because members of Congress, the executive branch, CISA wants to hear from all of those folks.
Hmm.
Members of Congress want to hear from all of those folks. And so it's a made up job. My parents are very concerned, but it is literally like some of the most rewarding work that I've ever been able to do. And I really am just like excited when something drops in my inbox and I hear about an organization or even hear about a company that I haven't known and they're like, "Oh, we saw that you were working on low income rural communities and this is something that we've been trying to do." And you get to like have that first meeting with them and you see that people are trying to do profit for good. And
Hmm.
even if they don't have that language, it is like what you're going to do for communities if you can get what you need on the policy side of the house does not look, there's not a daylight of difference between
Yeah.
what the nonprofit community is also trying to do.
I love that. That's amazing. And I love that like you said, the for-profit, the bigger organizations that they're happy to be a part of that kind of ecosystem. That's amazing. I'd love to hear if there's like a success story, because you've talked and trained with so many different individuals and organizations. Is there an example you can think of someone making like a small but really powerful change using, your support, your tools?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to sound so wonky and in the weeds, but I just will hit the high levels of this for your listeners who are not into cyber policy. I would say the work that we were able to do with me, one of my clients, but then one of my for-profit clients, but then my one of my nonprofit clients, um, we were able to really change the way the federal government prioritizes open source software policy within
Hmm.
government. I say this as someone who was at CISA And when I was at the White House, we had these string of cyber attacks in 2021 from Colonial Pipeline, but also JBS, which was a meat processing plant. But one of the attacks that didn't get as much public oversight, but was a major attack, was the Log4j attack, which was concerning for all of us that work in cybersecurity because it was an attack that really exposed vulnerabilities on open source software, which we know is like the foundation of most of our critical infrastructure and our public services in the United States.
Hmm.
And I remember, um, of course, there was a ton of advocacy to the White House from the agencies to be like, Nicole, this is so important. We need Congress to be paying attention to this. We want hearings. We want all these things. And we really struggled to get a hearing that wasn't classified, to get a
Yeah.
full committee hearing, to get more than just the cyber subcommittees to focus on it. And one of the things that I told them told the community at the White House, but then also told the agencies, I was like, we just have not done our part in terms of educating members on what open source software is, let alone why they should care if we're having cyber attacks on it. But then also the open source community is so decentralized,
Yeah.
not
Right.
intended, but also they're very decentralized. They don't all work at the same place. They don't all, there's no like trade association where they're all there. So I was able to leave government, and one of my philanthropic clients, who's like very focused on tech policy,
Hmm.
they knew the importance of the open source software community, but also had like, because they had been trying to give out grants, and they're like, people are all over the place, and this is an opportunity because every time there's an attack or a crisis, it's also an opportunity to engage and to influence.
Sure.
And so I was able to work with a philanthropic client to run a complete advocacy process in DC. And what that looked like is not just talking to members of Congress and staff about open source, it is getting the think tanks involved, getting them to start writing about it. And so this was a philanthropic client. So the strategy I made is like, you know, this is how much money you all are going to have to put into. You need to be having summits. You need to be
Right.
having conferences. If the open source community is decentralized, you've got to get them to DC in a
Sure.
central location so that people who want to come and learn about this stuff, whether it's staffers, whether it's people from agencies, we have to, you cannot make it hard for the people that you are trying to influence to get information.
Yeah.
And so we did what I set up as a 12-month advocacy sprint that included civil society. There were academics who were involved because people were writing about this. There was so much writing that was already out there from academia. Civil society was focused on this in a very intentional way, and then corporations had divisions within their business that were also focused on this.
Hmm.
They just were not together in an organized way that even if you wanted to, from um, an executive branch position or a legislative branch, if you wanted to be helpful, you didn't even know what they needed. And
Right.
so it was a matter of getting the kind of the buzz of DC and then also showing up and being like, here's what we need policy wise. And we didn't need a law on open source software. What we
Hmm.
needed is dedicated personnel to be working on it within the agencies. But then we also needed like a trade association that people could centralize around. And we were able to do both of those things
Yeah.
with that client, that philanthropic client, getting strategic direction of like, because they're giving out grants and they're going to give out the grants anyway. And it's like, let's be strategic about who we're giving the grants to, what we're asking them to do. And even we had one of our conferences was like, just how do you message the importance of open source software? And that was one of the biggest conferences in terms of attendance. And you had all of these reporters who are the cyber beat reporters.
Right.
And they came too because they've been trying to pitch open source stories to their editors. And it's like all of us are like missing this boat, like some kind of
Yeah.
way. And in the end, we were able to, the White House, the Office of the National Cyber Director, issued a full strategy on what we were going to be doing on open source policy across the entire federal government. CISA set up an office that was dedicated to
Hmm.
open source software policy. And those things sound small, but I told people, I'm like, that strategy that the Office of the National Cyber Director, that is a roadmap to everybody. That is
Yeah.
like who this is who you call at CISA. This is who you call at the Department of Agriculture. This is who
Yeah.
is going to be working on this. But then to also have that dedicated personnel, that node within CISA means that it will permanently exist. And these
Hmm.
will be the people who will be those constant advocates for OSS in the executive branch. And so it's a little, the topic is a little geeky, but I like, and I wrote it up as like a case study and everything to like show
Yeah.
people, the DC influence game is a lot of people who are in the influence game. And the
Yep.
members of Congress that were able to authorize that office at CISA, but also who were able to appropriate more money for us doing open source software, it wasn't that they had said no before. Like most of
Hmm.
them were like, no one had ever really explained to us
Yeah.
how important this was and then exactly what it is that was needed. And what we needed is dedicated staff and personnel, and we needed dedicated resources, and we
Yeah.
needed to learn. We needed to learn how to translate the importance of it. So I'm very proud of that. It's very geeky and wonky, but
Oh, you should be proud. That's awesome.
yeah, it's
Um,
good.
I think a lot of our listeners, are in government, are work in resilience or technology fields, nonprofits, all that stuff. How can they bring advocacy principles into their own roles to help move policy forward themselves? What's your best advice?
I think just coming up with a strategy. Like I
Hmm.
find that people are doing so many different things. And when
Hmm.
you pull back and you say like, well, what is the ultimate goal of this? And I think if people were honest, sometimes it is just to influence. And I always say, don't go to the Hill and ask for a piece of legislation, or don't go to the executive branch and ask for a regulation if you don't need it. It's
Hmm.
totally fine and okay to say, we just want to be a thought partner.
Yeah.
We want to be in a place where we can be helpful when or if it's needed. And you don't have to only engage with the federal government or with international bodies when you have something you need. I actually think that's the worst time to show up.
Hmm.
And so what I would tell people in their daily life is like, you should go to that think tank event.
Yeah.
Yes, you can watch that congressional hearing online, but like, if you have the time and you're in DC, you should go to that
Go.
hearing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we used to do, it's like you pan who's in the audience. You see who's in the audience, because you're gonna have an opportunity when that hearing is over to like go up to the staffers and be like, this was a really timely topic. So glad that you all did it. Or you can send an email the following day and say, I want to come in and talk to you all about some of the things that came up in the hearing. And it's not that you have an immediate ask. It's, I think people forget that most of the time when you're in those public positions, when people are trying to engage with you, when they're trying to influence you, you are trying to do multiple things at once. And also you're trying to vet people. And so when
Hmm.
people are new or their organization is new, and now you're also trying to like, you're in a place where you're regulating them, or you're in a
Hmm.
place where you're doing oversight over them, it's really hard to set up to establish a relationship under those conditions. Not
Yeah.
impossible, but like for a number of reasons people are really hesitant. And so what I think people can do on a regular basis is to like you should be constantly engaging with this community in some way.
Hmm.
And if you can't, if you're not physically here, you should be engaging on LinkedIn. Everyone is posting these events, these conferences on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I love when I make a statement on LinkedIn and someone's like, I like this, but I disagree with you. I'm like, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want everybody around me to be like, oh, Nicole's always right. That's wrong. And also, when I tell people, when your circle starts turning into everyone is saying the same thing over and over again, your circle is getting too small. Like,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to policy, everybody should not be on the same page. We should be deliberate about getting to a solution that works for everyone. But
Yeah.
when we sit down, if everybody is on the same page, I just know we don't have enough people at the table.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what people like. You should be deliberate, you should be intentional, and you should be engaging in some way as often as possible.
I love that so much. Nicole, tell me what's getting you excited these days. What are you looking forward to? And where can people follow your work?
Yeah, I'm so excited about rural cyber workforce. Like, I am like, it's coming from another one of those places of like, now I'm just mad. And like we gotta do something. I want us to dramatically change how we're thinking about cyber policy
Hmm.
as it relates to rural communities, especially rural public services and utilities operators. You know this, there's just been a lot of focus on the workforce and like how do we get more people into cybersecurity? How do we get more people into these national security positions? And they are not showing up in my small rural town. Like there's just no trickle down that is happening.
Hmm.
And I think we have had the best intentions, but we're doing things that from a national security cyber perspective, they make sense. But when you think about serving vulnerable communities like rural communities and low income communities, they're not helpful to them. So some of that, what that looks like is we'll do a grant program, but people have to have matching dollars. Well,
Right.
rural communities don't have a tax base so that they can get the matching dollars. We'll do need based, but you got to fill out a grant application and tell us exactly what you're going to be using the cyber money for. Well, the rural utilities don't have a cyber expert, so they can't write a grant application to tell you exactly what they're going to be using the cyber money for. Also, we do a lot of programming with this idea of like we will get people into communities. But what I think we have to be realistic is like I love my town, but it's 2,000 people, it's no traffic
Hmm.
lights, and the Piggly Wiggly closes at 8. Laura, you're not moving to my town, right? And most people are not going to move to my town. And so
Right.
when we talk about rural communities, what we really need to be talking about is upskilling and training the people that are already there. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try to get people to come to all communities, but realistically, we have to use the population that is already there and kind of develop them from within. And so I'm very passionate about this. It's a project that I launched last year, and people are like, "Are you going to launch a new project this year?" I'm like, "No, because I haven't solved this." So I'm going to still be working on rural cyber workforce policy. I think it's kind of similar to the open source software. Like people need different things, but also the utilities have all of these like between Department of Energy, between EPA, but also between CISA and NSA. It's just a lot of players that are involved. But I think a similar process to what I did on the open source software is really what we need to be doing on rural cyber workforce. Everyone can always find me on LinkedIn. I That is where I do the majority of my posting, but also I'm trying to be, and I appreciate you having me on your show because what I'm trying to do a little bit more is kind of show up outside of the Beltway. And so
Hmm.
I would encourage people to, if you all are having these conversations in your town, in your state, my LinkedIn has a lot of DC events because those are the people who reach out to me. And because I'm so focused on rural communities right now, I really am trying to have some of these, or really a lot of these cyber policy conversations in those communities. So
Yeah.
I would love to use this podcast, but also if people are listening, people just need to send me a note on LinkedIn. There isn't a lot of barriers to access to me, and I'm really intentional about that. I want to be able to go to communities, have these conversations because I want to get something that is workable for the communities, but can also protect our critical infrastructure and our utilities.
Awesome. And website?
Oh, so you can start, everything starts at NicoleTisdale.com. That's like the easiest way to get to all the websites. And then the business website is Advocacy Blueprints with an S.com. But also all of those links, if you start at LinkedIn, they're all linked
They're all
there too.
there. Perfect. And of course, the book, which you can find in the book club, Right to Petition. Nicole, thank you so much for having this conversation today. Hope it helps folks to figure out how they can engage more effectively with their government and also some inspiration on what you can do in the advocacy space for yourself and your community.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura. This was really, really great. Thank you for everything that you're doing. So much of my journey with careers, I think people just sometimes it feels like people just fall out of the sky and they got these like great jobs or like they started their career at the top. And so I think it's really good and very insightful to have a podcast like this to just like come on and really like dig through like, okay, how did this happen? What did you do? Kind of
Yes,
thing.
exactly. No, that's the whole idea. And I'm so glad that you were able to be a part of it, Nicole.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Careers in Coffee Talk. Big thanks to our guest today for pouring out so many great insights. And hey, thanks to you for hanging out with us. If this episode gave you a little jolt of inspiration or made your day a little bit more brewed and balanced, be sure to click that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming up next. Got a minute? Drop me a 5-star review. It's basically the podcast equivalent of buying me a fancy oat milk latte. Quick disclaimer though, the views expressed in this episode are personal and do not reflect those of any organization. This conversation is not an endorsement of any company, product, or service. It's just real talk over virtual coffee, okay? So until next time, stay curious, stay caffeinated, and keep chasing the career that makes you feel the most alive. Catch you next time.